All right, man, peace. So the NBA recently released its 2018 Hall of Fame nominee class. Of course, they're going to talk about it, and I'm going to chime in.
Today, we'll exclusively on this show talk about nominations for the upcoming 2018 class of the Naismith Memorial Basketball Hall of Fame. New this year, players and retired coaches are now eligible after 3 full seasons of retirement.
I think that it's good that they lowered it. I believe it used to be like 7, and then they changed it to 5 years, and now it's 3 years. So that's good. People shouldn't have to wait 7, 8, 9 years to find out if they're worthy of going to the Hall of Fame. You never know what can happen in that time.
Finalists for the North American and Women's Committees will be revealed at All-Star Weekend. The full 2018 class will be announced at the NCAA Men's Final Four, and the enshrinement ceremony will be in September in Springfield. So let's check out some notable first-time nominees, including our guy, Mr. Big Shot Chauncey.
Let me say this. I'm on record as stating I do believe that Chauncey Billups is a Hall of Famer. Certain people might disagree with me from what I saw, and Chauncey Billups is a player that you really have to have seen play, because it's hard to look at his stats and say he's a Hall of Famer. You would have to have seen him play within the framework of his team's offense, and also in certain clutch moments. He was certainly a difference maker on every team that he was on in the 2000s. In my view, he is a Hall of Famer. I don't know if he's a first ballot Hall of Famer, but to me, he's a Hall of Famer. There's no doubt about it. Ray Allen, definitely a first ballot Hall of Famer. Steve Nash, first ballot. Jason Kidd, first ballot. On that right side, Chauncey, to me, is a Hall of Famer. I don't know if he's first ballot. Grant Hill, they may let him in because of his overall image. I'm not sure if he's a first ballot, though. I think that he's a Hall of Famer, definitely. He certainly would have been a first ballot Hall of Famer had he not gotten hurt. Richard Hamilton, to me, he's on a tightrope. I don't know if he's a Hall of Famer. And I'm of the belief that if you don't know, that most likely means that you're not a Hall of Famer.
That's a pretty nice class.
It's a heavy class, man.
It sure is. It sure is. Wow.
Again, so these are our first-time Basketball Hall of Fame nominees. We're going to talk about some of them throughout the show. We'll also talk about some of the repeat nominees. Ray Allen, Steve Nash, Jason Kidd, Chauncey Billups, Grant Hill, Richard Hamilton, along with Bob Huggins, Steve Fisher, Rod Thorne, Bobby Dandridge, Ed Hightower. That's quite the list.
Wow.
Who better start with then? Chauncey Billups. So, you're the 2004 Finals MVP, where you picked up that nickname, Mr. Big Shot.
And he deserved it. He's one of the great clutch shooters of the 2000s. Chauncey Billups is one of the great clutch shooters of the 2000s. Even though Kobe Bryant gets all the credit for being the best clutch shooter of that era, Chauncey Billups was right there with him, if not even better, possibly, in clutch situations in regards to percentage than Kobe Bryant. Chauncey Billups was a dominant player in clutch moments. The one thing that's probably stopping him from being a first ballot Hall of Famer is the fact that they kind of choked away the 2005 NBA Finals against the Spurs. Had Rasheed Wallace not had brain lock, they should have won that series easily. But when you make concentration errors against a team like the Spurs, it will cause you to lose the series.
Taking a look at some other career notes, because we want to make a good case to the voters.
Why you gotta show him in the playoff against us, man? On there. There you go. He's taking it out.
Look out, hitting the shots, big shots in the playoffs. You were champion, obviously, Finals MVP, world champion, which counts. We were talking about that before the show started. Your Olympic and USA national team duties count. 5-time NBA All-Star. Your jersey was retired.
Let me also say, once again, he was the difference maker when he went to Denver to play with Carmelo Anthony. His season with Carmelo is the season where Carmelo was able to make his one and only appearance in the Western Conference Finals.
So, how does it feel, first of all, to be mentioned among the greats?
Man, I tell you, just humbled and honored, to be nominated for the Basketball Hall of Fame. I mean, a kid from Denver, Colorado, who really not even a lot of NBA players come from the neighborhood that I came from, or even the state. So just a local hero in Denver that ceiling is possibly in the Hall of Fame is humbling to me.
And I believe, if I remember correctly, that he's also Lindell White's cousin. One of you brothers who has information on that can correct me, but I believe he's Lindell White's cousin. Lindell White, for those of you who remember, was the other running back in the USC backfield back in the mid-2000s, of course, along with Reggie Bush. Lindell White was the running back who was unable to get the first down in that classic national championship game against the Texas Longhorns, led by Vince Young.
So I'm just happy to be on the list, to be honest with you. I mean, I played really hard my entire career, left it on the floor, and I'm just happy to.
For me, I'm happy for him because we started out together.
Yeah, that's right, 97.
We started out together, and I saw the journey that he went on. I mean, he went from team to team until, somebody really believed in him as a player.
Definitely. I remember when Chauncey first came out. Chauncey was viewed as being a flop, and then he finally caught on with Detroit, thankfully for him. But he was a definite late bloomer. That's another reason why I'm incredulous. Well, I'm not really incredulous. It's just really annoying to hear a lot of the early criticism of Lonzo Ball. When you go through the history of the NBA, many of the great point guards in NBA history were slow starters. Steve Nash, Gary Payton, Chauncey Billups. A lot of Hall of Fame level point guards were slow starters. But I definitely remember Chauncey's the early part of his career. He had a hard time getting acclimated to the NBA. And he went to, I remember he was drafted by Boston. He went to the Toronto Raptors. And he was finally able to catch on with the Detroit Pistons. And that was just a perfect mix for him.
Who he was, got to Detroit, did his thing there. It seems like when he got to Detroit and then moved on, won the championship there, went to Denver, did the same thing. It's like wherever he went to, he won.
Absolutely. Even when he was involved in the Carmelo Anthony trade that brought them both to the New York Knicks, he was making big shots with the Knicks until I believe he got hurt and then he retired. But Chauncey Billups was a great clutch player. Had an extremely high basketball IQ.
What? Right. Took Denver. Did y'all go to the Western Conference Finals?
Yeah.
Took them to the Western Conference Finals. So, I'm happy for somebody that had to go through that journey of going from a team to team to find somebody that really.
That's funny about the two of y'all, because a lot of these names here are going to be guys who they came in with the expectations and they ran through. You guys had to struggle at the beginnings of your careers, different situations.
That's true. T-Mac also had early struggles. That's very true. A lot of the players who came into the NBA in the late 90s, they were not able to catch on early because the league back then was very, very physical. So it was very tough for players to come into the NBA and have immediate success back then. You really had to work your way in. Really had to work your way up through the league because of the level of physicality during that era, that mid to late 90s era.
But same kind of, it all didn't all click at once. So talk about what that journey is like from being like, who am I in this league to eventually being what you are.
My journey is unique, I think, than almost, Max is as well. But, for a guy coming in third pick in the draft to fall all the way off and almost be mentioned as a bust in the league, to get off of the mat and have a Hall of Fame worthy career
and I hope that you do get in the Hall of Fame, brother, because you deserve it.
Is unique, right? And it took a lot of perseverance, and I just fought through all of it. And I was a guy who, just like Max said, all I cared about was winning. I wasn't a stat guy.
That's why I stated, in order for you to understand the impact that Chauncey Billups had on teams, you had to have seen him play. You can't look at his stats and say, okay, he averaged 20 points, 10 assists for 7 years in a row and all that other stuff. He's not that guy, because they played in a system that involved a lot of ball movement. And they had a lot of guys who could score and could do various things. They really were a early 2000s version of the Bad Boys, where you were not going to have one guy who was going to have dominant numbers, but they had an assortment of players who could really play. And once again, imagine if they had drafted Carmelo Anthony like they should have. They probably would have won 2 or 3 more championships.
I didn't care what my stats looked like at the end of the game. All I cared about was trying to win the basketball game. As a point guard, the biggest stat for me was winning the game. Can you manage the game? Can you make your players look better than maybe they might be? That was the metrics for me. That was what I was trying to do. So to know that people can appreciate a guy that played for those reasons, it's humbling.
I mean, you're talking about somebody that led a team in an era where it was dominated by Shaq and Kobe.
Right.
Tim Duncan and the Spurs.
Right.
And they got a championship out of that.
And should have had 2.
Not a lot.
And almost got 2.
Almost got 2. Like, a lot of these guys that's on this list, man, well, Ray Allen got it, but like Steve Nash, great players that in that era couldn't win because of, Shaq and Kobe and Tim Duncan.
Well, more guys could have won, but the difference was in that clutch moments, certain great players had brain farts. And to me, that's the main reason why Chris Webber didn't get a championship, because in that 7-game series against the Lakers in 2002, even though the refs were doing whatever they could to help the Lakers, the Kings still had their moments when they could have taken that series in numerous games that they lost. Specifically Game 7, I remember Chris Webber shooting an air ball from the baseline. I'll never forget it. He definitely folded up under the pressure. Chris Webber was not a pressure player, as we all know from the timeout situation in college.
Hey, you just named one. Another big nominee at guard is Ray Allen. Started his career with the Bucks. Sorry about this video, Tracy. Why are we getting all these Tracy?
Hey, man, y'all acting like this ain't T-Mac show, man.
Hey, man.
Come on, man. This is out here making...
That's okay. I had 4-2 and we won that game.
I just respect that you tried to go block it, man. Most people would get out of the way.
Man, I'm trying to win, bro.
That's right.
Amen. So he's the all-time leader, NBA leader in three-pointers made.
This one's not even an argument. Ray Allen's a first ballot Hall of Famer.
2 NBA titles, one with Boston, one with the Heat. You guys both played against him extensively in the Eastern Conference. Chauncey, let's start with you.
And those of us who remember the mid-'90s, who grew up in that era, that was an era where that was like the last little bit of college basketball greatness. And some of you brothers out there might remember that classic Big East championship game between UConn and Georgetown, where Ray Allen and Allen Iverson went at it with each other.
Make a good case for why Ray Allen should be a Hall of Famer.
Well, I don't think that,
Why he
needs a case.
Why he is a Hall of
right
Famer.
there.
Right.
Ray Allen is a bona fide Hall of Famer. I mean, he's one of the most dominant players that played in the era that we both played in. Will go down as one of the best. I mean, he could do it all. I mean, he comes off down screens, not for twos, but for threes.
Right.
He can put it on the ground and go get a bucket for himself.
And could go and could dribble hard left or right and finish with the left or right hand early on. Great clutch performer. Great supplementary player later on in his career.
He was ultimate winner. He was a professional. You look at him right here. He saved Miami.
What?
And listen to what Chauncey Billups said there. He said, look at right here. He saved Miami. So the notion that LeBron James was saved by Ray Allen is not something that's just put forth by Skip Bayless. Many people understand that Ray Allen saved the Miami Heat in that situation. Okay?
Saved the day for a lot of teams.
What get lost with Ray Allen is people forget how good he was. Before he was with Miami and Boston, because he turned into just a jump shooter by circumstances.
Right.
But when he was with Seattle and Milwaukee, man, this dude did everything, man. Shooting, coming off the dribble shooting, making plays. He did all of that.
Absolutely. And he was one of the few players in the NBA who, when Kobe Bryant went against him, it was viewed as a rivalry. You see a lot of these guys, they come on the internet, Jordan never played against anybody at his position. I mean, that's so ignorant that it's almost, you almost would have to ignore it. Jordan played against numerous Hall of Fame level shooting guards in his era. The only Hall of Fame level shooting guards that Kobe Bryant went up against in his era were Ray Allen and then later on Dwayne Wade.
So I want to talk to you about that, man, because you have to guard him a lot.
I did.
Right? And so, again, like you said, some of the younger fans, they don't remember Ray Allen with the handle, Ray Allen with the bounce. And
Hey, man, y'all. Hey,
no, y'all can't keep showing that. Hold on now. There's other highlights.
Who's running this show, man?
Let's show I'm doing something else.
Yeah. But what was that like as far as trying to guard someone who you know is an elite shooter, but also he's not just a one-dimensional shooter. He can put on the floor.
See, he was a guy that can score in a variety of ways. You think about somebody that's in great condition, like a guy like Rip Hamilton, Ray Allen, and Reggie Miller. Like, these guys are non-stop movement.
Right.
But what he had on them was he had the off the dribble game. He had the athleticism.
Oh, let me also throw in Rip Hamilton. Kobe did go up against Rip Hamilton. So let me give him that much credit. Rip Hamilton, who happened to beat him in the finals in 2004, by the way.
He had the playmaking ability, and he never got tired, and he was clutch.
Yeah. I mean, his conditioning was legendary,
right? Gosh.
Ray's a short conversation.
Yeah.
He's bona fide.
Well, this one should be a short one, too. How about another great guard? Steve Nash, two-time MVP with the Suns. First-time nominee, made All-NBA in 7 of his 18 seasons. Third all-time in assists, an 8-time All-Star. Tracy, what kind of case can you make to get Steve Nash?
I don't have to make it.
Yeah, Steve Nash is definitely a bona fide first ballot Hall of Famer. Great player, dominant player in the mid-2000s. Was at the vanguard of the rejuvenation of offensive basketball in the NBA in the mid-2000s.
To make a case, I mean, it's right there in front of you, man. But what I will say,
4 times 50, 40, 90 player.
Say is you're talking about a fierce competitor, tough guy. I mean, he was just a master at running that offense under D'Antoni, and him and Amari Stoudemire. Like, he was so difficult to guard because of the players that he played around and just how smart he was with the basketball.
Number one, Steve Nash knew where everybody was going to be on the floor. They were one of the few teams in the mid-2000s that made sure that they had a multitude of shooters on their team. And then the fact that they had a point guard who had such a great handle and great peripheral vision, but was also probably the best pure shooter on the on a team of great shooters. That's what made Steve Nash so potent. And he definitely deserved that first MVP. The second one, it was kind of like, it kind of felt a little Jerry West-ish. When I say Jerry West-ish, it kind of looked like the NBA was trying to capitalize off of having a Caucasian superstar. But he was still a dominant, great player, Steve Nash was.
Hell of a passer. I think what people don't realize, he was an awesome shooter. Like, awesome shooter. Knocked down, couldn't leave him open.
Anywhere.
No, not at all. 50, 90 guy, 4 times. Come on, man.
Yeah. Listen, man, I had so many nightmares playing against this guy. I mean, he's one of the best I've ever played against. One of the guys, and there weren't a lot of them, to be honest with you, that I felt a lot of times didn't have an advantage on mentally. Right. I was always trying to be 2-3 steps ahead of a guy, thinking the game a little further out than most of my competitors. Steve was on that level. It was great competing against him. I mean, obviously 2-time MVP. Worked hard again to get there. I mean, his early Dallas years, it was kind of up and down.
Steve over there looked like Dennis the Menace with the blonde hair.
I can remember them booing him sometimes in that arena at a young age, and you know, he turned out to be one of the greats.
You know, it's funny. I mean, obviously, the best years of my NBA life was spent alongside Steve Nash in Phoenix. This is a guy who, for 9 straight seasons, his team led the league in offensive efficiency. 3 in Dallas and then 6 in Phoenix. Yeah,
he was very good to borderline great in Dallas. People forget that. Then he went to Phoenix and then just became an unbelievable player in the D'Antoni system.
The 2 things I think about when I think about Steve and his greatness is, one, he was probably one of the most positive players to be around. Guys felt good when they were around Steve. If Steve gave you the ball and you messed up, he wasn't the guy, hey man, you got it next time. And that did wonders for guys' confidence. Yeah. The other thing is also, when you think about great passers in general, most of the time I always feel like the great passers are guys that are great passers because they couldn't score, right? They couldn't shoot. Mm-hmm. And so guys you got to play off of, you go under on the screener. Steve wasn't that. Correct. Like, if you did that, it was at your own peril because he was such an incredible finisher and scorer from all aspects of the floor. Yeah. And I think that's what really changed. And when I see like guys like Steph Curry now, to me that's the evolution of what Steve was, like the point guard who's not just a great scorer but like an excellent shooter, right? Just from all aspects of the game.
And just to add on to what Amin said, not only that, but many people forget that when Steve Nash first came into the NBA, he was on the same team as Kevin Johnson and Jason Kidd. The Phoenix Suns had Kevin Johnson, Jason Kidd, and Steve Nash on the same team back in 1996. Steve Nash was sitting on the end of the bench. You understand what I'm saying? So it's a testament to perseverance that he was able to make himself not just an NBA player, but a great NBA player and then a dominant NBA player. Because to be quite frank with you, I remember when Steve Nash came into the NBA in the mid-90s. I mean, let's be honest. Most people thought he was just going to be another white dude sitting at the end of the bench. And he showed that he was much more than that. So he deserves all the credit in the world. He's definitely a first ballot Hall of Famer.
And I know to me, when I kind of measure greatness,
yeah,
you talk about how many guys he made better.
Mm-hmm. Oh, man.
And there's a long list of guys for not only for Steve.
You got a lot of guys.
Well, he damn sure made Jason Richardson better. You know, when Jason Richardson took his wife. But that's neither here nor there.
lot of guys paid, that's for sure.
Absolutely.
One right now. There's one right now sitting in the check getting paid. Thank you, Steve Nash. We're just getting started on this Hall of Fame nominee edition of The Jump.
Although what I couldn't do what my wife requested me 7 months ago and tell myself in that mirror that I deserve to be in the Hall of Fame, well, on this day, I can proudly say yes, I deserve to be here.
Well, brother, you know what? I agree that you deserve to be in the Hall of Fame, but you didn't deserve it on the first ballot. And you damn sure didn't deserve it over Chris Webber. I'm sorry. But that's neither here nor there. You didn't even deserve it. If you were up in the same year as Grant Hill, you would not have deserved it over Grant Hill. Because Grant Hill was actually able to get out of the first round of the playoffs.
I am truly humbled, I'm grateful, and proud to be in the class of 2017. Thank you very much.
That was an excerpt from our own Tracy.
And Isaiah Thomas was there. He's the one who led Tracy up onto the stage because Isaiah Thomas is the one who drafted Tracy McGrady. Isaiah Thomas was one of the great. He's got one of the great draft records in NBA history in regards to spotting talent. Isaiah Thomas is unbelievable. Drafted Tracy McGrady, Damon Stoudemire, Marcus Camby. The list goes on and on.
Tracy McGrady's Hall of Fame induction speech. T-Mac got in on the first ballot, but here's some notable repeat nominees for the Naismith Basketball Hall of Fame. Chris Webber, Ben Wallace, Muggsy Bogues, Maurice Cheeks, Tim Hardaway, Sidney Moncrief, Raleigh Massimino, Lefty Drizel.
Chris Webber deserves to be in the Hall. Tim Hardaway should definitely be in the Hall of Fame, but I'm not sure if he's going to get in because of his quote-unquote homophobic statements that he made a few years ago. Muggsy Bogues is not a Hall of Famer. Sorry. He's not a Hall of Famer. Ben Wallace should be in the Hall of Fame. I don't know if he's going to get in for a few more nominations, but he deserves to be in because he pretty much was the Dennis Rodman of his day, and he does have a championship. Maurice Cheeks should be in. Sidney Moncrief, for those of you who don't know, was a great shooting guard in the mid 80s. I'm not sure if he played long enough to get into the Hall of Fame, but he was a great two-way shooting guard that played in the mid 80s. And of course, Tim Hardaway, he was at the vanguard of the crossover craze that started in the early 90s. Him and Rod Strickland, they were the ones who really popularized the crossover in the NBA in the early 90s.
Well, Chauncey, do you think your former teammate, Ben Wallace, I guess you also played with Webb as well, but do you think Ben Wallace will end up in the Hall of Fame?
I think Ben Wallace shouldn't be on that list right now. He should have been in last year with T-Mac. I really believe it.
Well, no, he should have been in last year ahead of T-Mac. All right, I know it sounds like I'm banging on T-Mac. I love T-Mac, but he was not a first ballot Hall of Famer. All right, and like I said, Tim Hardaway, a lot of those guys, Tim Hardaway deserves to be in. I don't know if he's going to get in. He was the one who really popularized the crossover in the early 90s. And I mean, like, you had guys in the 80s, of course, the great Isaiah Thomas, who had a phenomenal crossover. But Isaiah Thomas's handle was so great, he wasn't even really known for having one specific move.
That I'm not being biased. If you're a numbers guy, you look at the numbers and you say, okay, Kembe Mutombo, man, Dennis Rodman, guys like that you say, listen, he completely can dominate a basketball game without even touching the ball.
Right.
On offense.
And he could whoop Ron Artest's ass, too.
Because he's going to touch it on defense. He's going to block some shots, he's going to get some steals. And, again, his journey was unique.
Yeah.
You know, guy went undrafted. I think Ben Wallace,
Black college, baby.
That's right. Virginia Union, he deserves to be in the Hall of Fame. I hate that he had to wait an extra year, but...
And like Lloyd Banks said on that G-Unit mixtape song all them years ago, I'm like Ben Wallace on a rebound.
A year, but hopefully this is his year.
What about C. Webb?
C. Webb, I mean, you talk about the Basketball Hall of Fame, #1 player in high school.
Yeah.
Goes, kind of changes the game in college with the Fab Five, dominated, and had a awesome basketball pro career. I mean,
if C. Webb played today, all the little young fans today would say there was nobody back in the 90s playing like C. Webb. If Chris Webber was playing today, all the little young dudes that watch the NBA today would say there was nobody back in the 80s or 90s like Chris Webber. Like, Chris Webber could pass, shoot, dribble, and defend. His problem was that he would have mental meltdowns in the clutch. That was the only thing stopping him from being a championship level player.
I mean, I think that he's a Hall of Famer as well. I thought he should have been last year with T-Mac. And
yeah, he should have been in there ahead of T-Mac. Why the hell T-Mac get in the Hall of Fame before Chris Webber and Ben Wallace, guys who actually won championships? Like, nothing against T-Mac, but the brother couldn't even get out the first round. And a lot of times, like, you know, the Kobe Bryant fans, they get mad at me when I mention 2005 when Kobe didn't even make the playoffs. I hold all these guys to the same standard. I'm sorry, but if you're a first ballot Hall of Famer, even if you're on a team by yourself, you have to have at least one series where just off your greatness, you get your team out of that first round matchup. If you're a 6 seed, your greatness should allow you to beat a 3 seed at least one time if you played 13, 14 years. That's just how I feel about it. Like, Grant Hill was able to get out the first round. All right, he could never get out the second round, but he could get out the first round.
And, you know,
no question Webb is
I think he is
a Hall of Famer. I mean, you're talking about somebody that in the 2000s was on one of the most dominated teams, the Sacramento Kings, and he led that. So I suspect that he should be in next year.
Really quickly on both of those guys. We talk about Ben Wallace. We talk about all the time what defense wins championships and stressing the little things. Like, from a young age, we're all taught, like, these are the things that win you basketball games. And he exemplified all that. And then we turn around and say, no, because you ain't shooting enough. No. How crazy of a message is that?
Yeah.
So that's kind of messed up. And C-Webb, definitely. You look at his accolades, college, high school, international, NBA. The guy was a winner everywhere he went. All right, let's get back.
And let me say this about C-Webb before they move on to another topic. C-Webb came on to various franchises that had a history of just no success and turned them into winners. Like, he went to the Bullets, made them a playoff team. Went to the playoffs originally with the Warriors when they were going through a rough spell. You know, when Chris Mullin was starting to get worn down, when Tim Hardaway was always hurt, he got them to the playoffs. Then he goes to the Bullets before they became the Wizards. He goes to the Bullets and leads them to the playoffs. Then he goes to Sacramento, a team that had no history of winning, and was able to get them to the Western Conference Finals.
Get back to some of the more notable first-time nominees again, including a former teammate at Chauncey's. Man, this whole thing is a family affair for you. This time, Rip Hamilton. As someone who won a title with Rip, what made him so special?
What made him so special? T-Mac talked a little bit about his energy level. He was so efficient.
Rip Hamilton's another one of those guys that I would consider an all-time great role player.
He came to play every single night. Not a lot of people know this, but Rip was a very good defender.
Yeah.
I mean, very scrappy, one of the most competitive players I ever played with, and just stayed with his game. He didn't try to go shoot threes because the three came prevalent. He didn't go in there trying to dunk on people. He did what he did and did the best of the league.
Great mid-range shooter. Very, very good fundamentals. Wasn't a spectacular player. Didn't have a lot of bounce. He wasn't somebody who was going to go and dunk over people in traffic. But he stayed within himself. And he really was. That's why I say that 2004 Pistons team, they were very reminiscent of the late 80s Pistons. Very reminiscent at every position. And Rip Hamilton was very reminiscent of Joe Dumars.
Come off those down screens, make plays for others, but if not, he's going to be a high level, very efficient two-point jumper.
And that's not to say that Rip was as good as Joe. Joe Dumars had a better handle than Rip Hamilton and could create a shot off the dribble better and was a better defender. Joe Dumars was one of the great defenders in NBA history. But Rip Hamilton was of that ilk.
I had to guard this guy, man. And you talk, again, I mean, reiterate what he said and what I said earlier. You talk about one of the best conditioned basketball players I ever competed against. A guy that won on both levels, collegiate level and in the pros. So I suspect that, you know, he would be a Hall of Famer.
Yeah, and another guy who, again, started his career, he was all right in Washington, you know, and then...
I gave him 50 in Washington.
Now, in Rip Hamilton's early part of his career in Washington, he was under the tutelage of Michael Jordan. Of course, Michael Jordan did him the favor of trading him to Detroit for Jerry Stackhouse. And I truly believe that Michael Jordan did that on purpose so that Rip Hamilton would be able to go somewhere else where he could grow as a player.
Remember that, Rip?
They don't have that highlight up.
Put that highlight up.
Hey, that's all right, Rip. We got him back. We got him back, Rip. Don't worry about it.
All right. Our next
It took a
first-time
team effort, but we got him.
Our next first-time candidate is one of your former teammates, another guy who got me in this chair right here, Grant Hill.
And before they move on to Grant Hill, let me also say Chauncey Billups was talking about how they got Tracy back. I'm trying to remember which playoff series it was. Maybe it was 2001 or 2002. One of those, whichever one it was, where the Orlando Magic went up against Detroit. I believe it was in the first round. And Tracy McGrady had, like, the first 2 games in Detroit, he scored like over 40 points. It was unbelievable. T-Mac was a phenomenal talent. I just don't think that he's a first ballot Hall of Famer because I don't think he did it long enough. And he never had any success in the playoffs. Like I stated, even with the lack of talent that he had around him, for me to be a first ballot Hall of Famer, if you've never won a championship, you must have at least gotten out the first round once. I'm sorry.
Tracy, we know
My God.
G. Hill struggled with injuries while you guys were teammates in Orlando. But tell us about what that experience was like playing with a guy who at one point was the best player in basketball, pretty much the heir apparent to Michael Jordan.
I wouldn't go that far. Grant Hill was never the best player in basketball. Grant Hill's first season was 1994. When he first came into the league, Hakeem Olajuwon was the best player in basketball. By that next year, Michael Jordan was back to being the best player in basketball. So G. Hill was great. He was viewed as the next guy, but they could never find a guy who could come help him. He was a guy who really was the LeBron James at that time of basketball. He would get the ball at the top of the key and run the offense, make all the decisions. He was explosive, especially going right. He could dunk over anybody going right.
Look here, man. I watched this guy in college who just dominated college, and then when he got to the Pistons, he was a walking triple-double. It was the only thing G. Hill couldn't do was shoot the 3 ball. But anything else, I mean, he really did everything in the basketball court. Had a great feel for the game. People, you know, it was some questions about his toughness, but man,
He's not dunking on Alonzo, but those questions are the way.
G. Hill was a dog, man.
Yeah, you couldn't be a great player back in the 90s and not be tough. Because every time players drove to the basket, they were going to get hit hard. Because that wasn't the era of the spread offense where even your 4 or 5 man was standing outside the 3-point line, where, you know, you could bust your man down off the dribble, and if you beat him, you're at the basket. No, it wasn't any James Harden basketball back then. Right? You beat your man off the dribble, and there were 2 guys waiting for you in the lane. So you couldn't be weak back then, not in that era.
Man, and then he was one of the reasons why I really wanted to go and play in Orlando, because, I mean, I grew up watching G. Hill.
Scary.
And he taught me so much about the game, man. Just, you know, how to, just certain things, how to get to the free throw line a lot more, how to create contact on the court. And I've never seen anybody in transition do it better than G. Hill. Yeah. So a guy that, you know, won on the collegiate level, did his thing in the pros until he got hurt. Yeah.
To me, another easy case. You talk about Basketball Hall of Fame. Great high school player. His college career has been well documented. He was a great. I thought he was the first LeBron James.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, I think he'll probably be a first ballot Hall of Fame because of, I mean, if you factor in what he also did in college, yeah. Because I believe he won 2 national championships in college. And then even in his last year in college, I believe he led them to the national championship where they lost to the Razorbacks, if I remember correctly. But you brothers can correct me on that if I'm wrong. But I believe they lost to Corliss Williamson and them boys back in like 94.
Yeah, that was a point forward, could get to the basket. His first step was really quick. Great dude, great ambassador for the game of basketball. I mean, to me, easy case. Unfortunately, we didn't get to see him all the way through. But man, oh man, he was special.
And you know, we had him at the tail end of his career in Phoenix, and for him to his career to be reborn, people thought Grant Hill's career was done. And for him to get those extra years with us, that was really special.
And Grant's one of a few guys back in the 90s who, unfortunately, due to injuries, people never really got to see how great they could have been, because Penny Hardaway was another one. Had Penny Hardaway not had those degenerative knee issues, man, oh, man.
And at that age, overcoming all those injuries, he was guarding the best player.
Yeah, he was our best defensive player.
He was.
Man, this class is so full of another one. First time nominee, Jason Kidd, second all time in assists.
Hey, man.
Chauncey, what was it like guarding this dude?
It was hell. Hell guarding this dude. I mean, he's one of my heroes. I mean, one of my favorites of all time. I wanted to be like him.
If Jason Kidd had been a great shooter, he probably would have been one of the top 10 players to ever play.
I almost went to Cal because of him. So competing against him, pretty much my entire career was...
Like, Jason Kidd is like a top 40 all-time player and couldn't shoot at all.
It was a treat. It really was. I mean, another one of those guys, unbelievably high basketball IQ, was mental warfare playing against them every single time, and not to mention it was physically a battle too. One of the stronger guys in the league at the time at the position. I mean, another first ballot Hall of Fame.
2003, I left the USA games playing with one of his teammates. I left there shaking my head like, why can't this guy be my point guard? He made the game so easy for us, man.
Jason Kidd really found himself when he came to the Nets. And don't get me wrong, he was very impactful his first few years with the Mavericks. And he was good with Phoenix, but it's when he came to the Nets that he really found himself. Jason Kidd was the type of player that could change the entire culture of your franchise. Like, he took the Nets to the finals.
Man, so easy. I understand Richard Jefferson and Kerry Kittles. I see why y'all do what y'all do. And Kenyon Martin, like, he was so smart, man. He just completely just made it easy. It was effortless for what we had to do on our end.
It's crazy. Obviously, he was tremendous right out the box. He's co-rookie of the year with Grant Hill. But he's got his own struggles in that. Remember, they used to call him Ace and Kid because he had no J. And to go from that to not only on the all-time list in three-pointers made, but to be a 40% shooter late in his career, you never stop getting better, right?
And let me say this also. Notice that Carmelo Anthony really had his greatest success when he had Chauncey Billups with him in Denver in 2009, and when he had Jason Kidd with him in New York in 2013. Those are really the only two times that Carmelo had any real success in regards to the playoffs, or really just in regards to winning, period. Carmelo has always been a player where, his teams have done moderately well because he played under George Karl, but the only time that his team was ever considered to be a contender for serious success is when he had a great point guard, which tells you what? Carmelo Anthony does not have a high basketball IQ, and he's not a leader.
And that's testament of hard work.
Yeah, absolutely.
Testament of hard work in the summertime, developing some of those deficiencies.
Great list. I mean, and it still goes on. There's still more. We're going on another commercial break with the.
But anyway, after the next commercial break, they came back with a bunch of nonsense. But that's neither here nor there. Those are the contenders for the NBA Hall of Fame. I believe that many of them are going to make it. Certainly first ballot. Guys like Jason Kidd and Steve Nash and Ray Allen. Those guys are definitely first ballot. I hope Chauncey makes it as well. And C-Web should make it. But anyway, peace.